Thank you so much for joining the ShareBird, the Essential Go-to-Market Show, tips and strategies, where we offer short video content in interview-style conversations with global product marketing leaders. I'm your host, Yasmeen Turayhi. So whether you're an early-stage startup or a public company, almost everyone struggles with the same question. What does it take to have a successful product launch? Today, I'll be talking to Jane Kim. She's the Senior Director of Product Marketing and Lifecycle Marketing and Content at Life360. And she'll be sharing some of her tips and strategies from her tenure as a product marketing leader in the last decade. Jane, can you tell us what are some of your top learnings and takeaways on launching a product successfully in the market?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot, but I would say some of the key learnings that could also be a recency bias is around really being close to the customer insights. So oftentimes as product marketers, you keep a lot of the customer insights close to when you're thinking about product innovation and ideation, product market fit through go-to-market, naming, positioning. But oftentimes I feel like when you are under tight deadlines, it's easy to lose sight of the customer. So one thing that I think is really successful for me personally is making sure that you always have that line of communication with the customer throughout every phase of the product ideation down to go to market. So to me, what has been really helpful is just leveraging beta forums, doing a lot of user interview and prototyping and testing to make sure that you're constantly getting a pulse of how customers are reacting to a product or certain marketing communications. Oftentimes, you can be overconfident as a marketer that something will resonate really well with an audience, but it's always good to have that bias of not really being 100% in the know and getting that confirmation through those vehicles to have those communications with your audience.
Awesome, Jane. And can you share an example of that exact reference point in your own work? So doing user interviews and beta forums, maybe you could share a specific example of how that's been able to kind of elevate your product launch?
Yeah, for sure. So one recent example, Life360 particularly, we were in this interesting situation where it was the pandemic, COVID was in the limelight. A lot of kids as well as parents were shelter in place. And, everyone knows the power of TikTok. And we saw that a lot of teams were using TikTok to voice their concerns. And there was some fake news around, if you actually get an app to a 1-star rating, that it would get delisted. So there was a lot of activity on TikTok to start that momentum for Life360. A lot of these teens have never used Life360 before, but they kind of fell within that bandwagon. So we had to react really quickly in how we were going to provide a solution and make sure that we were listening to our teen audience and providing a new feature that would kind of help eliminate this issue of them seeing that Life360 was taking away their privacy. So we had this concept of something called safe zones, which was literally like a geofence to provide a general parameter of where you are, but not your exact location. And so when we had initially ideated the feature, it was very much in the lens of keeping the target audience to teens. And when we started doing prototype testing with our entire audience, we saw that there was a lot of negative implications with parents. And rather than building trust, we felt like this feature was causing some negative sentiment towards parents. So we had to pivot a little bit, kind of keep in mind that actually this is a really great feature for geofencing that could be used not just for teens, but also for parents as well. So we decided to pivot the name. We called it Bubbles. Initially, the tagline was, hey, Bubbles is for you teens to create some privacy, but we try to have a much more utilitarian approach, so it didn't have such negative visceral reactions towards parents. And we really pivoted the positioning towards a customized location sharing option. And it's been a successful launch so far. We were recognized by Apple's apps team and featured in their app store. and been successfully received by parents as well as teens.
Amazing. Wow. Incredible. That's a great story and a great example of the power of customer research and just really speaking
Yeah,
to your customers. I find that so many companies that I speak to always say that they're speaking to their customers, but if you
right,
dig a little bit deeper, most of them aren't. Jean,
right.
can we talk a little bit about team structure and how creating the right team structure could be helpful to a successful launch?
Yeah, for sure. One of the beauties of product marketing is that it's very cross-functional in nature. That's what has drawn me to product marketing, and it's one of the beauties of what I find really gratifying in my experience as a product marketer. You really do rely on cross-functional teams, whether it's PMs, engineering managers, design, to really bring something to life. Uh, we are actually starting to test and implement a new structure at Life360, which is basically a squad format. And the squad format is, in principle, supposed to bring all these cross-functional stakeholders together so that they can ideate and innovate together. I feel like so far it's been really successful because everyone is brought in from stage zero to really think about, what are the customer insights? What are some innovative white space opportunities that we can really lean in on? And then how do we bring that to life by really collaborating together from a design perspective, from a marketing and messaging perspective, down to what the product or feature is actually going to look and feel like in the experience. I think oftentimes when you don't have a really closely collaborative knit structure to begin with, it can be kind of like a handoff situation where a product team or an engineering team comes up with the idea and then hands it off to a designer and then hands it off to a marketer. And oftentimes I feel like that doesn't really elevate the strategic thinking that a cross-functional partner can bring to the table to improve and create a delightful experience. So for me, I think whether it's a squad format or just making sure that you're creating an environment where there's a lot of cross-pollination between different cross-functional teams, that's really beneficial to making sure that you're creating a, a delightful and holistic experience across all customer touch points.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think in my experience, and I'm sure in your experience, oftentimes product marketers get treated a little bit like, I'd say, just straight marketing. And so
Mm-hmm.
we end up, um, getting the sort of product life cycle midway through, and inheriting something that's already like 75% complete. So that way
Right.
we can't really implement some of the customer feedback into the process. Like it's already kind of too late. So I
Right.
love that. One thing to just double click on and follow up on this point, because I think it's probably one a lot of people have questions about, is bringing in people who are maybe not technical into an early stage, like these squads that you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
How are you able to kind of reconcile folks who are non-technical and bringing them into kind of a space where they need to become more technical, right, in order to actually contribute to the entire product life cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can speak from my own experiences because I came from a creative marketing background, and really had to lean in on my technical skills, but not at Life360, but at Amazon, where as like a PM and kind of acting also as a hybrid PM, you have to understand what it takes from a systems perspective or a platform perspective to actually launch something and bring that to life. So some advice that I would have is just be really curious and open. Like I think when I first started off in taking that more of that hybrid approach, I asked a lot of questions and really built a strong relationship with my engineering partners and really earned a lot of trust around, making sure that we had a broader shared vision and what that looked like, and then made sure that we were both collaborating to those North Star goals so that, I saw my EM partners as a resource and they saw me as a resource to really bring that vision to life. And then being curious and building that trust and that relationship really helped me navigate and understand and learn those technical requirements to also not only build something together, but also help scope the project, right? Like there's always leaders or the C-suite executives who want to create things in a very timely fashion, but being able to learn and lean in on my more technical partners, like on the PM or EM side, to really understand what that looks like and provide that communication was helpful for me. So I think as a non-technical person, you can always learn, but it's about building those relationships and then also being curious. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredibly helpful. And I think having an openness and a curiosity is something that a lot of folks miss. But that is a question that I get a lot. A lot of folks even take it a little bit further and say, well, how do I develop that relationship with the more technical folks in the organization? And I think, that might be a whole separate conversation. But it's just something that has been coming up a lot. So I wanted to highlight it.
Got it.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen companies make in product marketing?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest mistakes are the antithesis of like some of the questions earlier around not being close to the customer, right? So I think to your earlier point, you had said it where, a lot of companies say that they're customer insights driven and they're really thinking customers first, but I think theory is much easier than practice. And there are times when product marketers lose sight of the customer or also fail to push the boundaries with their counterparts, right? Whether it's a product management team or an engineering team, and really providing that great experience. So I think one of the examples that I learned this from was at Amazon. I was on the Fire TV team, and we had launched a new hybrid streaming media player that also was a hybrid of Echo, so that you could use voice commands to basically remote to control your TV. Some of the value proposition and product market fit was there. There's hands-free capabilities. When people are watching TV, they want to have a very convenient experience. And while we were able to deliver on some of that, there were some bugs around being able to really fully control some basic commands like volume up, volume down, turn on, turn off the TV. And so as a product marketer, I think the biggest failure was like understanding what the customer requirements are, but then not pushing the product and engineering team to really provide that full experience, so that as a marketing team, those were the exact taglines that we leveraged, right? So like hands-free, just use your voice to like check out something on Yelp on your TV, or turn down the volume or turn off your TV. But in practice, we realized there were a lot of bugs with that actual feature. And so not pushing your counterpart to really deliver on that full experience is a common mistake, and one that is oftentimes difficult to grapple with, because that's when you start to see like high churn rates, lower retention, bad reviews. And so that's something to keep in mind as a product marketer.
Great. Thanks, Jane. And lastly, what are some interesting topics that product marketers should consider now that we've entered this kind of new world order? I would say post-quarantine, but we're kind of still in it. Yeah, what have you seen at Life360, and what have you just kind of seen, generally speaking, as a new way to think about product marketing?
Yeah, I think, one of the interesting things with being shelter in place and, dealing with the pandemic is that, a lot of us have spent an entire year without going to work physically, and not being able to see our friends and family. And that has caused, some semi-permanent change or shifts in behaviors, right? And how people interact socially and how they spend their time. So we've seen this, with like the rise of Netflix and Amazon, like people really have learned to be at home and be able to live their lives freely at home, whether it's through a Peloton or Netflix entertainment or FaceTime or Zoom with their friends. And so some of the challenges as a marketer is really trying to figure out, how are some of these behavioral changes going to be permanent? And then how do we need to think about some of our features and product offering to really accommodate that? So specifically speaking to Life360, we are known for our tracking and safe driving features. And when we saw COVID hit in March, we did see some drops in people leaving their homes and driving around, which caused us to see a lot of dormant users. Not that people were churning, but some of our use case for the app was less relevant when people were sheltering in place. We are seeing that people are starting to go out more, and I think there's a lot of optimism around the vaccine coming. There's some light at the end of the tunnel that people can return to somewhat of a normalcy. But I think some of the things that we need to be mindful of as marketers is that some of these behavioral changes are permanent, right? Like, people will tend to interact a little bit differently. And so what does that actually look like? And how can we really accommodate our features to make sure that we're taking that into account? And I think some industries are going to be permanently changed as well, like restaurants. And so what that will look like when everyone, when everyone has a vaccine and we can go back to normal, I think it's fair to assume that not everything will go back to normal. So how can we pivot and make sure that we're taking into account these changes?
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I think that's something that a lot of companies are thinking about. Customer behavior is changing, and there's no way to really understand how it's going to continue to change, right? Like some of the metrics that we've used in the past are no longer relevant.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a great point. So, Jane, we're going to wrap up. What's your main takeaway on being a good product marketer that you want to share with our audience?
In terms of being a great product marketer, I would say one is, very, very on theme to our discussion is being customer centric, and really having a pulse of how customers are reacting throughout every stage of your work stream, whether that's an ideation of a new feature and working with your cross-functional partners, down to go to market, down to you've already launched something, how can you think about improving that experience and what are the customer pain points? Another thing is, like, I think user insights and building that muscle is really great, but then actioning on them is even more important, right? So if you understand, why people are lapsing or churning, or what are some of the pain points that you've identified, being able to create actionable recommendations to improve the experience, and then getting buy-in with your PMs, your EMs, your product designers to actually make that immediate impact is just as powerful. So I always say that a strong product marketer is creating tangible things and creating amazing experiences as quickly as they can. And so thinking from the lens of the customer and then making that an actionable takeaway is an advice that I would like everyone to take away.
Amazing. Super, super helpful. Jane, thank you so much for your time. I absolutely love, your perspective on product marketing. I think you're incredibly thoughtful, especially when we met at Life360. So I am really excited that you are the first product marketing leader on our show. And I think you have a tremendous amount of knowledge. So Jane, for folks who want to maybe stay in touch or learn more about you, would you suggest that they follow you on LinkedIn? What's sort of the best way to learn more about you?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I think you can search me for with my name, Jane Kim at Life360, or you can also feel free to email me as well. I'm at jkim@life360.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And for our audience, stay tuned for upcoming shows with product marketing leaders from startups to public companies as they share some of their best tips and strategies on the go-to-market space. You can also send us a note, tell us what you learned, and tag us. We love hearing from you. And for those of you who are looking for more material on go-to-market, you can also check out my book, Product Marketing Debunked, which is on Amazon, as well as on Kindle, or one of my many free articles on Medium. And if you're serious about go-to-market, I'll be launching a live online 4-week class called 4 Weeks to Go-to-Market. Details in the bio. Thanks again.